Hello everyone! Tonight we're going to Leipzig. It's wet, it's cold, and you probably won't survive this. The year is 1813, and you're standing ankle deep in October mud, somewhere between a burning barn and a line of French artillery. That just fired a little too close to your left ear. The sky is gray, not with clouds, but with smoke. You can taste the saltpeter and cordite on your tongue, even over the smell of boiled cabbage from some poor villager's shattered home. This is the prelude to what will become the largest land battle Europe has ever seen, until World War I, that is so. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And drop your location and local time below, because you'll want to remember where you were when Napoleon's luck finally snapped in half. Now, turn down the lights, turn on the fan to some soothing background music, and enjoy your evening. Ride together. You're following behind a line of worn-out French grenadiers. Their greatcoats hang loose, patched and repatched. No songs, just the shuffle of boots and muck. These men once marched into Moscow. Now they march back through Saxony tired, cold, and quietly dying from the inside out. After the hellscape that was the Russian campaign, Napoleon I's glorious Grand Army is no longer so grand. Fewer than half the soldiers here today are veterans. Many are teenage conscripts. Some don't speak French, but somehow they still follow him. And there he is, Napoleon Bonaparte. You can see him in the distance on his gray horse, rein tight, shoulders tense. He's not the same man from Austerlitz in 1805. That man was sharp, precise, coiled like a steel spring. This one carries ghosts. Still, he has reasons to believe. He's chosen Leipzig because it's the gateway to all of Germany. Lose it, and France's grip on Europe crumbles. Win here, and maybe, just maybe, he can negotiate peace from a position of strength. Napoleon knows the coalition armies are converging, but he bets they're not ready to fight as one. That's his gamble. He has about 190,000 men formidable, but outnumbered. The coalition, over 300,000 eventually. Russians, Austrians, Prussians, Swedes, and unlikely alliance of monarchs who all hate each other almost as much as they hate him. But Napoleon has a plan. He's not going to wait. He'll strike first at the hinge point near Walcoe and try to destroy one piece before the others arrive, as the day darkens. The cavalry rides past cuirassiers in dented breastplates, their horses breathing fog like dragons. They clatter over wooden bridges built by Polish engineers working through the night. You glance at one of them, a teenager with raw hands and hollow cheeks. He gives you a tired nod. He knows what's coming. The terrain is strange. Rivers split the field into awkward sections, the Pleiss, the Elster, the Part, villages. The map like spilled breadcrumbs, Konowitz, Probstida, Makern. Napoleon studies them like puzzle pieces. He sees opportunities for defense, traps, funnels, the makings of one final masterpiece. The rain begins again. Of course it does. Cold drips down your collar as orders are shouted across the bivouac. Men stuff damp bread into their mouths. Few laugh. Too loud maybe at a joke, maybe at nothing at all. The cannon thunder in the distance is steady now. They call it the king of battle for a reason. You don't get to ignore it. It becomes part of your heartbeat. In a tavern dash, turn dash command dash post, the emperor's map lies open, weighed down with lead shot and wine bottles. Berchier stands by with a ruler. Ney paces. Marius, Napoleon's famously flamboyant brother-in-law's, brushing mud off. His plumes like it's just another gala night in Paris. The mood is tense, but oddly optimistic. Napoleon murmurs something under his breath about Alexander of Russia and Schwarzenberg's poor timing. He believes the Austrians will hesitate. He believes the Russians are stretched too far. And he believes most of all that fortune still belongs to him. Spoiler, it doesn't. The French start positioning their artillery, nearly 700 guns. Batteries roll into place across makeshift roads built from church pews and stolen shutters. You stand beside a caisson crew unloading cannonballs like they're fruit. One of them jokes about using round shot to play petanque if the weather clears. It doesn't. Here's your odd detail of the evening. One General Victor insisted on wearing a scarf, scented with lavender. Not to impress anyone, but to mask the stench of gunpowder and unwashed uniforms. It didn't work. And so the first night closes. The men sleep where they stand. or don't sleep at all. You try. You wrap yourself in a damp blanket and lie under a broken wagon wheel, staring up at a sky that flickers red from the artillery beyond the hill. And through it all, you keep hearing whispers that Napoleon has reinforcements coming, that the coalition commanders are quarreling again, that maybe, just maybe this time, he'll outsmart them all. Historians are still debating whether Napoleon genuinely believed he could win at Leipzig, or whether he was bluffing even himself. Some argue, he thought, a sharp blow could force Austria to reconsider. Others say his pride wouldn't let him fall back. Not yet. You roll onto your side and cough quietly into your sleeve in the morning. The largest battle Europe has ever seen will begin, and you will be standing in the middle of it. You wake up to the sound of drums, hooves, and the crackle of rain on canvas. A soldier nudges you with the butt of a musket. "Get up," he grumbles. "The Emperor's already started." You squint into the dawn. It's October 16th, 1813, and you are about to watch Napoleon Bonaparte play his final good cards. Out here, near Wachau, south of Leipzig, the fog hangs low and greasy. You can barely see the white coats of the Austrians gathering on the far ridge, but you can hear the signal guns and feel them. Every boom shakes the mud inside your boots. Napoleon isn't waiting for them to come. He's attacking. This is vintage Bonaparte. Strike first, strike hard, split their lines before they can coordinate. You march behind columns of men from Victor's II Corps and Loristan's V Corps. The Imperial Guard looms behind like a hammer. Behind the curtain, Napoleon's Batifi can smash Schwarzenberg's Austrians before the Prussians and Russians arrive in force. The coalition might collapse under its own weight. Spoiler, it won't. Still, at first, the attack works. Near Wachau and Liebertwockwitz, the French surge forward, bayonets glinting like shark teeth in the mist. You dodge between apple trees and artillery craters, just in time to see Murat charge ahead with his heavy cavalry S, dressed like a fashion disaster from a fever dream. Gold braids, leopard skin, ridiculous helmet plume. You try not to laugh, or stare, or get trampled. And here's your authoritative historical fact. This morning's cavalry engagement at Liebertwockwitz is one of the largest ever fought up to that time. Around 20,000 horsemen crash into each other across muddy fields, sabers flashing in a swirling, thundering chaos that looks more like a painting than a real battle, until you notice the screaming. But Napoleon is not just throwing bodies at the enemy, he's threading needles. From his hilltop command post near the village of Thonberg, he watches the battle unfold with eerie calm. Berthier hands him messages. Aides gallop in and out with reports. He's like a chess player hunched over the most crowded board ever. Each village is a pawn, each ridge a question mark. By midday, Napoleon has pushed the Austrians back, his skirmishers hold the heights, and for a moment you think, he's done it. He's actually done it. There's a weird moment brief, silent, beautiful when the cannons pause, and you hear birdsong through the smoke. Then everything changes, because while you are focused on the south, the north has come alive. You hear it before, you see it, a fresh wall of gunfire near Möckern. Russian and Prussian forces under Blücher have arrived and are smashing into Marshal Marmont's corps. Napoleon's southern victory is already being flanked. He thought he could fight one coalition army at a time. He thought wrong back at headquarters. The Emperor's expression doesn't change. He stares at his maps, repositions a matchstick, murmurs something about reserves. You wonder if he still believes the myth of himself. And here's your unusual detail. Napoleon's personal chef, Dunon, insists on preparing the Emperor's lunch under artillery fire. It's some half-hearted chicken dish with a burnt crust. The Emperor eats 3 bites and waves it away. To dry, he says, by afternoon, the cost of his gamble becomes clear. Yes, his central attack has made gains, but the flanks, they're cracking. The Austrians regroup and hold the bridges. The Prussians in the north don't break, and behind them, the Russians are coming. Always more Russians. The same ones he thought he'd broken in Moscow. Not forget the Swedes under Bernadottius, Napoleon's former marshal-turned-enemy crown prince of Sweden. You honestly can't make this stuff up. The man once kissed Napoleon's hand and now sends battalions to kill him. Historians still debate whether Bernadotte's slow arrival was deliberate caution, or the world's pettiest revenge got by nightfall. You're crouching in the ruins of a farmhouse south of Leipzig. The walls are pocked with musket holes, the floor is muddy, and someone's torn coat is your new pillow. You listen to groaning horses and the whistle of surgeons cutting by lantern. Light dot, you replay the day in your mind. Napoleon had brilliant moments his feint at Lindenau, his use of the Imperial Guard to plug gaps, the lightning speed of orders sent across impossible terrain. He still had that touch, but not enough men, not enough time, and too many enemies. The fires die down. An officer nearby mutters, "Tomorrow we break them." He says it twice, as if repetition makes it true. You stare up at the thatched ceiling and wonder if Napoleon believes it too. Because the thing is, he hasn't lost. But you can feel it. The wind has shifted. By morning, the wind's not just shifted, it's howling, cold, sharp, and soaked with wood smoke. You're awake before the bugles this time. Boots already on, muskets slung, nerves unraveling like old thread. Day 2 of the battle, and now, the world is on fire in more than one direction. To the north, at Möckern, you're shoved into a ditch beside troops from Marmont's V. Corps. You can barely hear the officers screaming orders over the roar of Prussian muskets. The air is thick with a kind of fog that smells like gunpowder, sweat, and regret. A French dragoon in the trench next to you offers a piece of old sausage. You say no. He shrugs, eats it anyway, and ducks as a cannonball skips past. Here's the news nobody wants to hear. The Allies have arrived in full. You blink into the haze and make out ranks of Russian infantry under Bennigsen, Austrians under Schwarzenberg, Prussians under Blücher, and even Swedish troops lurking to the northwest. All coordinating sort of which is weird, right? Because these people should hate each other. The coalition was stitched together by spite, not strategy. There were egos, national agendas, languages, rivalries, and yet here they are, charging toward Napoleon like it's a group project they actually agreed on. Historians still debate whether the Allied strategy was genuinely coordinated or if it was a chaotic miracle stitched together by shared hatred. What they do agree on, this is the moment when Napoleon begins to realize that his empire, his magic, his myth, might not be enough anymore. You hear the phrase Schlacht der Nation, Battle of the Nations, passed from one soldier to another in different accents. No one really knew what to call it at first, but the size of it, impossible to ignore. Talk numbers. You're now caught between nearly 600,000 troops. Napoleon commands about 190,000, the coalition, over 330,000 and growing. This is the largest battle ever fought on European soil ever. Until Verdun, and you're in the middle of it with mud in your ears and a musket that jams every fourth shot Blücher S. Prussians push hard at Möckern. Marmont's corps bends under the pressure. You stumble through the streets as buildings collapse around you. Prussian Landwehr militia in rough blue storm courtyards with bayonets fixed. A man barely old enough to shave screams as he locks a grenade down a stairwell. The French try to hold the line with volleys and cold steel, but you can feel the front shifting, slowly, horribly, like watching a glacier crack. Napoleon's genius was in movement, rapid strike, improvisation. But Leipzig is becoming something else, a siege in open fields. Back near Napoleon's headquarters, one part of the coalition before the rest arrived. But the Austrians didn't break. The Russians didn't tire. The Prussians, if anything, seemed to be fueled by caffeine and historical revenge. And then there's Bernadotte, the crown prince of Sweden Napoleon's ex-bro, now fully team coalition. His Swedish troops arrive late and take their time. Some think he was deliberately slow, still playing both sides. Others argue he did just enough not to be excluded from the victory. Still, Napoleon holds on. You watch as he orders Ney to the south, rushes cavalry east, and personally redirects batteries in the center. He's everywhere. He's trying to stretch his will across rivers, hills, and language barriers. But the battlefield is just too big, and his commanders, not all of them are brilliant. Marshal MacDonald's corps get stalled in swampy ground. Augereau barely responds in time, too, shifting orders. You see courier after courier galloping across a landscape littered with broken wagons, craters, and the occasional dead horse. That's an unusual sight, a Russian general, Pyotr Wittgenstein, riding past the French lines briefly by accident. No one shoots, Everyone just kind of stares. Then he realizes and turns around. One French soldier actually waves. Here's your odd detail. Of the day, some troops still believed in duels. A French grenadier challenges a Prussian officer to single combat during a lull in the fighting. No one stops them. They fight with sabers. The Frenchman wins, then helps his opponent to the medic tent. Later, they drink together. War is weird, but by evening, McKernfall's Marmont pulls back, leaving behind nearly 9,000 men. That's not just a lost position, it's a hole in the French northern line. You feel the air grow heavier, and you're in the path of the breath. You stumble back toward Leipzig, past wounded men crawling through cabbage fields, past an abandoned piano still playing one note in the wind. And in the distance, you see Leipzig itself, a medieval city, with narrow streets, stone walls, and the sudden realization that it's about to become a fortress. Back at Napoleon's tent, maps are being rewritten. He still doesn't admit defeat. He believes he can rally reinforcements from Dresden. He believes the Bavarians won't betray him. He believes maybe too much. You sit on a broken barrel, chewing a crust of bread, staring at your filthy hands. There's a moment quiet and weirdly peaceful where all the noise fades into your ears ringing. You feel like you're floating. You think, how much longer can this last? And the truth is, not long, but the worst hasn't even started yet. Dawn again, but the light doesn't comfort you this time. It just reveals how much worse everything looks. The skies are still that leaden gray, the ground slicker than ever, and the smell, oh God. The smell has now added burnt wool damp, gunpowder, and that sweet, unmistakable rot of fallen horses. October 17th, the second full day of fighting. You're alive, somehow, still in uniform, still following orders, still pretending this isn't all slipping through your fingers like bloodied water. Napoleon isn't gone yet. That's what you keep telling yourself. That's what he keeps telling everyone. He believes he has to believe that the center can still hold. He rides out that morning in his greatcoat, flanked by Cuirassier's jaw clenched tighter than a drum. He's thinner than he was, more tired, but his mind still sharp. Too sharp, maybe. Here's the thing. He's expecting reinforcements. From Dresden, Marshal Rainier and General Bertrand are supposedly on their way. He also believes Bavaria is still on his side, and that a contingent of Bavarian troops will reinforce his right flank if they arrive. If they haven't changed sides, if the bridges still hold. That's a lot of ifs for a man surrounded by half of Europe today. Napoleon concentrates his efforts on breaking through the Allied lines to the north and west toward Lindenau, the only viable road to France. You're there as engineers begin clearing debris and setting defensive positions in case of retreat. But retreat is not a word the Emperor likes to hear. Not yet. Not from you, lanes, and a tiny stone church. Today, it becomes a death trap. The Austrians and Prussians are bearing down from the south and east. Napoleon places his trust in Marshal Victor and the men of the Old Guard. If they hold here, maybe he can shift forces elsewhere. Maybe. But something feels off. The Saxons. They've been acting strange for days, murmured conversations. Quiet salutes. Officers who look away when you make eye contact. These are supposed to be ally soldiers under Bernadotte's old alliance, but they're also locals, and they're not convinced Napoleon's winning anymore. One of them, a lieutenant you've eaten with before, won't look at you this morning, just tugs at his collar and mutters in German. You don't know what he says, but you know what it means. Something's coming, and here's your historical fact. Napoleon had been warned. Several reports had reached him suggesting the Saxons were wavering, that they might defect mid-battle. But he dismissed them, said it was fear-talking, said the Saxons had bled for him before and would again. That was a mistake. The first fighting at Probstede is fierce. You're crouched behind a stone wall while French skirmishers pour fire into advancing Prussian ranks. Cannonballs tear chunks from buildings that have stood since the Holy Roman Empire. The church tower falls with a crash you feel in your chest. You see a French drummer, boy couldn't be older than 12, dragging an ammo crate across the yard. A shell lands just a few feet away, kicking up dust and blood. He keeps dragging. You want to scream at him to stop, but you don't have time. The next wave is already coming. Despite everything, the French line holds 4 hours. Napoleon throws the Imperial Guard in Nohaye's final reserve, his personal symbol of indomitable will. They surge into the town like thunder in human form. You see their tall bearskin shakos, their disciplined volleys, their slow, relentless advance. If this battle can be won anywhere, it's here. But it's not just about this one village, because up on the hill, you hear something you were dreading. The blast of unfamiliar cannon. Wrong angle, wrong sound, wrong uniforms. You turn, and there it is. The Saxon corps, thousands of men in full uniform, have turned. Not just hesitated, turned. They wheel their artillery around and fire into the backs of the French lines. The same men who'd eaten beside you, the same ones who sang with you the week before. Now, gunning down your comrades like strangers, you've just witnessed a mid-battle betrayal. Napoleon's reaction is legendary. He's standing near the village, reviewing the field, when the first Saxon shots crash into French positions. He goes rigid, his staff scrambles. "Treason!" someone yells. "No," the emperor says quietly. Opportunism. Historians are still debating whether the Saxon defection was orchestrated or spontaneous. Some believe they'd been in secret talks with Bernadotte for weeks. Others argue it was raw survival instinct. The moment they saw Napoleon's position weakening, they flipped to save themselves. Either way, the result is the same. French morale collapses. You see whole units falter. Some try to rally, others fall back in panic. At Lindenau, Bertrand's corps tries to stabilize the retreat road, but the enemy is pressing on all sides. Now, Napoleon calls for more cavalry, but there's none left that isn't already bleeding into the earth. Odd moment. Amid the chaos, a Prussian officer stops to rescue a French surgeon trapped under a wagon. He drags him clear, salutes, and disappears into the smoke. War is chaos, but not everyone forgets how to be human by nightfall. You're sitting near a ruined mill, holding a broken musket. There's nothing left to fire. The cannons are still booming in the distance, but you know it's over. Not officially, not yet, but the shape of the world has changed. Napoleon still hasn't left. He still thinks he can retreat in order, that there's a way to preserve his army, regroup, rebuild. But you, sitting in the cold, surrounded by wreckage, already know he waited too long, and tomorrow will be the worst day yet. You don't remember falling asleep, but you remember waking up because the ground is trembling, the kind of deep vibration that rattles your teeth before your ears catch up. October 18th, the fourth day, and now it's collapsing. The Saxons' betrayal was the first crack. Today, the wall comes down. All of it. Napoleon is no longer commanding a campaign. He's commanding a catastrophe. And you're stuck right in the middle of it. A speck of mud and bone trying to survive the avalanche from where you are. Outside Probstida, again the smoke is so thick, it feels like a solid thing. Men wander blind through fields of broken carts, dead horses, and boots with no owners. You hear shouting in 3 languages, maybe 4. French officers scream 4. Reserves that no longer exist, the Imperial Guard. They're spent, the cavalry, gone. Ammunition is low, and gun crews are dying faster than they can reload. But Napoleon is still here, still walking the lines in his greatcoat, mud up to his knees, face as calm as a marble bust. He doesn't yell, he watches, occasionally nods, occasionally mutters a one-word order that changes the entire shape of a flank. You wonder what he sees. You wonder if it looks like hope, even now, this morning. Napoleon arranges his army into a horseshoe shape around Leipzig defensive. Now, no more illusions. Each part of the crescent is anchored by villages turned into strongpoints. Reudnitz, Stitteritz, Ponsdorf, the idea. Then begin the withdrawal. But it's too late for ideas. You're sent east, to Ponsdorf, a village that has the grim honor of being exactly where everything goes sideways. Coalition troops pour in from the northeast Russian grenadiers, Austrian infantry, and, yes, the Swedes finally make a meaningful appearance. It's like the whole continent decided to converge here. All at once, you crouch behind a crumbled barn wall, musket shaking in your hands. In front of you, 3 Saxon battalions fire on their former French allies with deadly precision. You think of that Saxon lieutenant, the one who couldn't look you in the eye 2 days ago. You wonder if he's one of the ones shooting now. Here's your historical fact. Over the course of today, some 30,000 French troops will be lost, captured, or wounded. The Allies lose about the same. That's not a battle. That's a bloodletting. You scramble through an orchard where the apples are bursting, not from ripeness, but from shrapnel. The trees are full of crows. One of them lands on a corpse and hops off like it knows better than to start eating during a CANNONADE dot at the same time. The battle for Lindenau Napoleon's escape route heats up. You hear the distant rattle of musketry. Marshal Bertrand holds for now, but more Allied forces are pushing toward the bridge. If it falls, the French won't retreat. They'll drown. You run into a Polish lancer on horseback, barely conscious, his uniform hanging off him like laundry. He's muttering something about reinforcements from Italy. There are none. He doesn't know that yet. You let him believe. There's a curious moment when silence falls for about 15 seconds. Not total silence, just. You lift your head above the trench and see a single cannon crew on the Austrian side waving frantically at someone. A white horse has broken loose and is galloping between the lines. For a weird minute, no one fires. Then it's back. With fury, and here's your odd detail. A number of French soldiers attempt to desert by pretending to be wounded. They coat their bandages in goat's blood and drag themselves toward the lines, hoping to be captured rather than die. One gets caught. The officer forces him to reload a musket with one hand. By late afternoon, the French line is crumbling in chunks. You hear bugle calls that no one answers. You pass an old guard sergeant with tears in his eyes, not from fear, but from rage. He mutters, "We should have left 2 days ago." He's not wrong. And finally, the city itself. Leipzig. The French army retreats into it like water, draining from a broken barrel. Narrow streets, timbered houses, low bridges, not a city built for an army, and certainly not one in full, collapse. You're ordered to fall back to the inner defenses. The crowd of wounded civilians and soldiers becomes a slurry of uniforms and screams. And Napoleon, still here, still hoping to get out most of his army before dark. Still convinced the rear guard can hold long enough to evacuate. Still writing orders on paper already smudged with rain and blood. You pass a printing shop with a broken window inside. Pages flutter in the wind like dead leaves. One of them bears Napoleon's old proclamation to the German peoples. Come as your liberator. It's hard not to laugh. Historians still debate whether Napoleon's failure to retreat earlier was driven by arrogance, bad intelligence, or just sheer stubborn faith in his own myth. Some say he honestly believed he could still pull off a victory. Others argue he knew he was losing but refused to let go of Germany without a final punch. You're not even angry at him. Not really. He's a man who once reshaped all of Europe. Now he's clinging to the edges of a map that's folding in on itself. Evening falls, and the retreat begins slow, tragic, and far too late. You're among the last sent out of Probstida, covering a column of limping infantry and wagon loads of injured friars burned behind you. You don't look back. But even now, one last piece of disaster is waning. The bridges, they'll become the final horror tomorrow. You find a place to lie down in the shadow of an old archway. Musket propped on your knees, ears still ringing. The air smells of cordite and burned leather. You hear crying, laughter, a man playing a flute on the second floor of a wrecked house, and somewhere in the city, maybe even just a few streets away, Napoleon is still awake, still thinking, still here. It's October 19th, and everything feels wrong. The wind, the light, even the silence, it's all too sharp, like a blade just before it cuts. You're standing in the middle of Leipzig now, the city groaning under the weight of too many broken wagons, and too many prayers going unanswered. Today is the day Napoleon leaves, but not fast enough. You move westward with the French column, shuffling toward the Elster River under gray skies and a mounting sense of doom. The only way out is over the single stone bridge at Lindenau, only crossing that hasn't been captured, burned, or turned into a mass grave. There's a second, smaller wooden bridge behind it. That one has a very specific order attached. Blow it up after the last troops cross. Spoiler, it doesn't go that way. Let's rewind a little. Napoleon spent the early morning walking the city walls, inspecting the retreating lines, issuing last-minute commands. He still believed he could extract 100,000 men if the timing was right, if the rear guard held, if the coalition hesitated, if you're pressed, between cavalry horses and wagon wheels, every few minutes lifting a child or wounded man onto a cart, then ducking as cannon fire shrieks overhead. Austrian and Prussian troops are already pushing into the city from the north and east. The trap has almost closed. Napoleon finally gives the order to withdraw in earnest around mid. Marshal MacDonald is to cover the rear, with the Polish corps holding the left bank. Engineers prep the bridge at the rear charge laid, fuse ready, and orders clear. Not until everyone's across, but the crowding at the bridge is unbearable. Units jam together. Horses bolt. One of the wagons catches fire, panic ripples down. The entire line. You're clutching the straps of your pack, one boot in the river, as an officer yells himself hoarse, trying to restore order. And then the explosion. It shouldn't have happened. It wasn't supposed to happen. The bridge detonates hours too early, with thousands of French troops still on the wrong side. No one really knows who gave the command. Some say it was a young corporal who panicked. Others claim a wounded engineer misread the fuse line and set it off by accident. Historians are still arguing about it, but you don't need an academic debate. You were there. You heard the wood split, the rocks groan, the river scream, and you saw the panic now. The only way across the Elster is gone, and thousands of French soldiers are trapped inside Leipzig, with the enemy closing in from all sides. You're one of the lucky ones. You were just barely on the west bank. Behind you, chaos, screaming, gunfire, a wall of smoke. Men leaping into the river. Some can swim, some can't. Polish infantry try to build rafts from shutters and doors. Horses thrash in the water. You watch 3 men die trying to cross on a fence rail. And in the middle of it all, Marshal Poniatowski, the Polish general, hero, Napoleon's most loyal ally, wounded already, twice, refused to leave. His men urge him to surrender. He refuses. You see him ride into the Elster, his white horse already soaked, his uniform dark with blood. He makes it halfway, then a bullet, then the water, the last marshal of the empire, dying not in glory, but in a river too shallow to honor his name. That image stays with you. Later, someone will write a poem about it. You'll never be able to read it. You're sprinting west now, down muddy roads choked with wagons and sobbing refugees. You pass a nun carrying a child, a drummer boy covered in ash, a cannon crew firing into alleyways just to slow the enemy down. The Imperial Guard forms up one last time at the city gate's back straight, faces blank like statues guarding a lost temple. Napoleon is already gone. He crossed the Elster before the bridge blew, leaving a rear guard that didn't know that, or rear anything. He rides west toward Erfurt, silent, motionless, accompanied by a handful of staff and the weight of an empire collapsing behind him. Here's your historical fact. Napoleon lost more men in the retreat than in the 3 days. Of battle combined, over 30,000 soldiers were captured in Leipzig after the explosion. Others drowned, others vanished. But here's the odd details. Some French troops, still trapped inside the city that night, dressed as civilians, and escaped by pretending to be tailors, monks, or chimney sweeps. One of them, legend says, made it all the way to Paris, disguised as a traveling harpist. No one knows if it's true, but it should be. You finally stop to breathe near Lutzen. The roads are clogged with the wounded, the starving, the lost. But there's a strange, solemn quiet now. No shouting, no commands, just people walking west, like ghosts looking for somewhere to haunt. You find a dead horse by the road and sit. Down beside it, you haven't eaten in 2 days. Your hands are shaking too much to drink. You stare at the horizon and wonder if the emperor will turn around, if there's another battle waiting. If this was the last one, no one knows yet that the war will drag on for another 2 years. No one knows about Waterloo, or exile, or Elba. All you know is that Leipzig is behind you, and so many didn't make it out. Napoleon said later that the bridge was a grave mistake, but by then it was already a tomb. You don't walk for a while. You drift. Your legs move, but your mind is still back at the river, watching that bridge explode in slow motion, watching friends vanish into smoke and cold water, watching Napoleon disappear into the west like a shadow with no shape. Now, a few days later, you find yourself near Erfurt, huddled under a broken cart beside a half-dead campfire. You're not sure what hurts more, your feet or your thoughts around you. Others mumble, snore, cough, and you wonder what everyone's wondering. Why didn't he leave earlier? Why? With the coalition closing in from 4 directions, did Napoleon wait until Leipzig was a cauldron? Why did he commit to a battle on flat ground, surrounded by rivers and enemy reinforcements? Why didn't he run while he still had the legs of his army beneath him? So you imagine you're back in his tent not as a soldier, but as a whisper in the dark. Let's rewind and look into that flickering candlelight with him. A moment of introspection. A strategic autopsy of the man they once called invincible. Starts with pride. Napoleon had lost big before Moscow, obviously, but even that disaster ended with him marching out alive. He'd rebuilt his army from almost nothing in less than a year. Young conscripts, but still breathing. And somehow, he believed that meant he could do it again. "They think I'm finished," he said once. Let them think so. But believing in your myth too much, that's a fatal drug. And the intelligence, bad, fragmented Napoleon was fed. Reports that the coalition armies were disorganized too, slow to coordinate. He believed Austria might still flip sides. He hoped Sweden would sit this one out. He thought, and this is key, that internal. Divisions in the coalition would buy him more time. Historians are still debating how badly Napoleon misread Allied intentions. Some argue he was misled by his spies. Others say his own court had stopped, telling him hard truths. Either way, he placed his bed-enrolled snake eyes. There were signs, so many signs, even before Leipzig. Smaller German states were peeling off. Bavaria, Saxony, Württemberg, they weren't ready to fight against him. Not yet, but they weren't dying to fight for him either. Saxony especially. The defection wasn't out of nowhere, it was the culmination of days, even weeks, of hesitation. Napoleon knew this. He saw the gaps in their lines, heard the mutters in the ranks, but he waited anyway. Why? Maybe because Germany was the last domino. Once he lost the German Confederation, his buffer against Russia and Austria would vanish. His empire would shrink not just in size, but in legitimacy. The Rhine would become a border, not a front line. He would no longer be a continental emperor, just a French one. Besieged and shrinking, so he stayed. He fought Leipzig, not just for military reasons, but for psychological ones. It wasn't just about troops and terrain. It was about narrative. He needed to show Europe he could still win. He needed to scare them back into negotiation. That was the dream. Win one more crushing victory, and maybe Tsar Alexander would talk peace. Maybe Francis of Austria would pull back. Maybe the coalition would dissolve the way it had a dozen times before. Looked real. Remember part 2. That initial push on October 16th, Napoleon's troops held the field. The Allies faltered, Probstede burned, but the line held. If only the reinforcements had come, if only the Bavarians had stayed, if only the Saxons hadn't turned their guns, if. But dreams can't hold cities, and belief doesn't stop cannonballs. You turn your thoughts to his inner circle. Did Marshals name MacDonald, Murat, what were they telling him? Did they urge him to retreat? Murat, perhaps, with his flair for survival and changing sides. MacDonald, loyal but grim, nay, ever the fighter. Some sources say Berthier begged Napoleon to fall back. Others claim no one dared raise their voice. In his mind, he was still the genius of Austerlitz, still the man who crushed Austria in a single December morning. But Austerlitz had been 8 years earlier, and 8 years is an eternity when the world is changing under your boots. He had no advantage of terrain at Leipzig, no surprise. No high ground, no unity of command, and worst of all, no more fear. The Allies had stopped fearing him. That's what changed everything. In 1805, he marched and Europe flinched. In 1813, he marched and Europe followed him to Leipzig with 500,000 bayonets. But he stayed too long. He stayed because leaving would have meant admitting defeat before it happened. He stayed because he couldn't afford to lose the German states. He stayed because the myth of Napoleon was as much about defiance as it was about brilliance. There's an odd story that someone once saw Napoleon standing alone during the retreat, just staring at a tree, not crying, not talking, just staring. He didn't notice his staff waiting. He didn't move for 5 minutes. Maybe he was thinking of his son, maybe of Moscow, or maybe he was counting how many battles you can lose before they finally start calling you a loser. You blink and come back to the present. The fire has burned down to embers. You hear men snoring, coughing. One sings softly in Polish. Another mutters names, in his sleep names, that are probably already carved into stone back in Leipzig. You stretch your legs and stare at the sky. black as ink, stars hidden behind smoke and time. Napoleon is still riding west, deeper into France, but now the war is coming with him. And this time, it won't stop at the Rhine. You make it to Mainz in early November. Your boots are mostly rags now, and your uniform's just a memory of what it was. You pass wagons crammed with amputees, supply officers hoarding biscuits, and generals riding like statues through villages that no longer wave. Napoleon has crossed the Rhine. He's out of Germany. The emperor, whose shadow once stretched from Lisbon to Moscow, has retreated into France itself, and for the first time, the enemy is behind him, and still coming. You find a barrel to sit on outside a tavern in a ruined town north of the city. There's no music inside, just the dull clatter of spoons and slurred French and German spoken with equal bitterness. You can't shake the thought. It's all unraveling. Leipzig wasn't the end of Napoleon, but it was the moment everything changed. Back in the capital, the newspapers are still printing victory stories. Some say the emperor withdrew in good order. Others blame the weather, or the treachery of Saxons, or the incompetence of engineers. None of them are wrong. None of them are right. The truth is something heavier. You've been in the mud. You saw what happened. This was the end of the offensive empire. After Leipzig, France is no longer a power on the move. Now it's a country under siege. And you can feel it in every step, every exhausted shrug from a fellow soldier, every village that refuses to open its doors to your foraging party. They've seen the future. It wears white uniforms and speaks Russian. That's the thing. That's the real punishment. They don't send diplomats. They send divisions. Leipzig is their permission slip. Now they know he can bleed. Now they know he can lose and stay lost. You sit and listen to the stories from the road, 100,000 men killed, wounded, or captured. Over 20,000 horses lost, more than 300 cannons abandoned, and the Rhine turned into a broken faucet that drips only ghosts. One man you meet, a cavalryman missing 2 fingers, tells you the most bizarre thing. After Leipzig, French musicians marched home playing sad songs. No La Marseillaise, no victory of Austerlitz, just dirges and laments. The people watching didn't even cheer. They just watched. That's when you know it's real, when even the band gives up the lie. And still, Napoleon tries to act like it's a temporary setback. Back in Paris, he begins spinning. Letters, proclamations, fresh uniforms for the next generation of conscripts. He tells the people that Germany is lost, yes, but France is secure. France will rise. France will never kneel. You almost believe him. Almost, but you've seen. Leipzig, you've walked the fields where horses lay in pieces, where the Polish guard vanished underwater, where the Saxon cannon turned like a bad joke and cut down their old brothers in arms. You saw the looks in the soldiers' eyes, not defeat, disbelief. That disbelief doesn't go away. Even now, sitting by a broken barrel, it clings to your uniform like ash. A French officer joins you, a young man from lion to clean to polished. He wasn't at Leipzig. He wants to know what it was like. You tell him about the cannonballs, slicing tents, about how the city trembled with every explosion, how the fog wouldn't lift for days, and how, in the end, nobody cheered when the retreat started. There was no go time, no rallying cry, just an awareness like a storm that stops pretending and starts raining. You tell him about Poniatowski, how he drowned a hero in a river, no wider than a city street. How men tried to build rafts out of shutters and church pews, how the bridge blew, and that was it. It was like someone closed a book we hadn't finished reading, you say. He doesn't speak for a while. Eventually, he tells you he's been assigned to a new battalion. The young guard, Napoleon, is raising it from scratch. Boys, 17, maybe 16. He shrugs. Better uniforms than muskets. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. You walk into Mainz later that day and see the hospitals spilling. Out into the streets, thousands of men with no legs, no hands, faces wrapped in bloody linens. Women handing out soup. Surgeons with sleeves up to the elbow in red. Leipzig followed you here. It won't stop. Not for years, in one corner. A bandaged man is whispering something about how the Austrians crossed the river right behind them. Something about Russian cavalry now entering Frankfurt. You stop listening. Instead, you remember a powder near Mekern, the burned wool, the 6-week stench of the Saxon campfires. You remember the Polish cavalry charging into a wall of fire. You remember turning around and not seeing your officer anymore. You remember the sound of the Elster swallowing voices like a pit of gravel. And now you wait. You're not going home yet. No one is. You're part of the next wave, those who will dig trenches in Champagne, defend bridges over the Marne, retreat again toward Paris when they come for the final blow. But tonight, for once, you sleep indoors. And your last thought is, he really stayed too long. Napoleon wasn't defeated by a cannonball, not by a general, not even by the coalition. He was defeated by his own refusal to retreat. If he'd pulled back earlier, preserved his men, regrouped in France, forced the Allies to march into winter on foreign soil, maybe he could have played another hand. Maybe the empire could have limped on. Maybe. But the Battle of Leipzig was not just lost on the field, it was lost in the mind. In the belief that the world would wait for him to win again. It didn't. It marched right past him, and now it's knocking on France's door. You lie back on a cot in a creaky old farmhouse near the French border. The war is still rumbling in the distance, like a storm rolling back in, but for a moment, you're warm, dry, alive. You've marched through one of the greatest military disasters in European history, not just a defeat, but a transformation. Leipzig wasn't just about Napoleon losing a battle. It was about a world that stopped believing in him and started moving on without him. Tonight, you'll remember the smoke. Over Makern, the rain near Probstida, the sound of an empire cracking like ice beneath your feet. And yet, for all the cannonballs and strategy, what lingers most is a single image, a Polish general riding into a river he knew he wouldn't cross. That's what Leipzig became, a place where loyalty drowned, where courage met its match, where even the emperor had to turn away. You probably won't survive the next war, few do, but tonight, you're part of something else, something that lived long after the bullets stopped. You carry the memory, and it sleeps beside you. Always now, hush, let the darkness close its hands around the light. Let the war ride on without you. For a while, let the past breathe through the trees and rest.